The title screen is an interesting phenomenon in video games. Every game has one, but most games don't do too much with it. It's just a way to welcome the player into the game, maybe setting the mood for what they're about to play in some vague way. But Princess Peach Showtime hides its two most gorgeous pieces of music behind each of its title screens. And yes, there are two. In one, we see the Sparkle Theater as it's been hijacked by the evil Madame Grape, and an ethereal solo piano piece lays out how troubling the situation is. In the other, after you've defeated Madame Grape, we see the theater restored to its former glory, with a crowd of theats happily returning to attend the various shows, and here a much more warm and lively solo piano piece congratulates us on a job well done. These two pieces are equally stunning in their own way and make for excellent foils for each other as we pick out and analyze the differences between the two pieces and how that affects their emotional impact. The first title screen theme, titled Entrancing Prelude, feels suspended in time, like it's welcoming you into a dream. Against the backdrop of the captured theater, dark purple light bathing the empty courtyard below, the quiet dissonances of the harmonies come out. The harmony has a lot of pretty moments, but they're surrounded by moments of tension that aren't so much dark as they are odd, and we get the sense of tainted beauty, an apt reflection of the state of the Sparkle Theater. The piece takes a hold of you in the first two notes, laying out a low D-flat bass note and then jumping up to an F major triad over top, giving us a D-flat major 7 sharp 5 chord altogether. I couldn't find an example of the Lydian augmented sound in video game music for my video on melodic minor modes.
I haven't found an example from a game yet, unfortunately.
If only Princess Peach Showtime had been out by then. Anyway, hearing the D-flat bass note primes us for a D-flat chord, but the major 7 sharp 5 sound is not at all what we were expecting, and the brilliant dissonant beauty of that chord just knocks us flat. The melody emphasizes this sound by stepping down from the third, F, to the second, and then dropping down to the sharp 5th, A natural. This gives us a tritone leap in the melody, our first clue that all is not well within the Sparkle Theater. The following bar of melody starts on the F again, but then moves into a tritone interval a half step higher than the first, keeping us on uneasy footing. This uneasiness is resolved in the third bar as we move to the major 7th and then resolve down finally to the natural 5th, A flat, a much more consonant melodic maneuver. The harmony underneath this section moves from D-flat major 7 sharp 5 to D-flat 6-9 to G diminished 7 and then resolves to a D-flat major 7 chord. But these chord choices have more to do with the desires of each individual voice that makes up these chords than any sort of functional harmonic progression. The opening chord is super spread apart, with lots of space between the inner harmony notes and the melody and bass lines, allowing us to hear these inner parts very clearly. If we track these inner notes, starting on the sharp 5th and major 7th of our D-flat chord, we see them both walking up by step to get from one chord to the next. The top voice moves from the 7th to the tonic before moving up to grab the 9th of our D-flat 6-9 chord, and then it chromatically moves up to E natural and then resolves up to an F as we move from our G diminished 7 chord to our D-flat major. The lower inner voice resolves up from A natural to B flat, the 6th of the D-flat 6-9 chord, stays there to become the 3rd of our G diminished chord, and then steps up to grab the major 7th of this crunchy D-flat major 7 voicing. The music continues in this voice-leading focused approach as we sync from D-flat major to a B-flat dominant chord. This first chord is voiced as an F minor triad over top of a B-flat root note, implying a B-flat 9 kind of sound, and this moves to a G major triad over top of these held B-flat and A-flat notes. This adds up to a B-flat 13 flat 9 chord, another absolutely gorgeous crunchy chord voicing, which leads into this B-flat sus 2-4 chord in the next bar. You can see each voice winding its way from the start to the target note at the end of the phrase. This A-flat holds the 7th through each chord, but the 9th above it dips down to the flat 9, then jumps up to the 3rd, which then resolves up to the 4th to end on this B-flat sus chord. Even isolated with the lower parts, this line is just stunning. The note above it moves up from the 5th to the 6th, G, holds there for a bit, and then resolves back down to the 5th. The melody starts on the 9th, and then gives a simple enclosure resolving back to the 9th, with the B natural leading tone injecting some tension into the line. It's a beautiful phrase, but if you look at the chords functionally, it makes absolutely no sense. You'll often see music move from a sus chord to a dominant chord, or a sus chord to a dominant 13 flat 9 chord, or even a regular dominant chord to a 13 flat 9 chord. The name of the game in normal proceedings is increasing the tension with each step, building the tension towards a resolution so that when the dominant chord resolves, it feels more satisfying. But here we're moving from not very tense to very tense, back to not very tense. It's a completely bizarre move harmonically, but each individual voice in the progression, when analyzed as its own melody, creates its own tension and then draws to a satisfying conclusion. This chord does resolve functionally after this, from a B-flat dominant sound to an E-flat chord, but this E-flat chord is also voiced as a dominant chord, an E-flat 9 chord to be precise, undercutting the sense of resolution with that flat 7th tucked under the melody. This final chromatic descent reminds me of something that Duke Ellington might do. The F natural is kept on top of each voicing as we move down by half step from E-flat to D7 to D-flat 7, giving us an E-flat 9 to D7 sharp 9 to D-flat 7. The last D-flat 7 here then resolves to D-flat major 7 sharp 5 as we move to the start of the loop. Or, I don't know if you can say it resolves, because it certainly doesn't feel resolved. Sinking downward with these dominant chords creates this tension, this momentum that longs to release itself, and then the piece just drops it as we move back to the beginning again. We don't get a resolution, we don't get any closure. All that tension and uncertainty just hangs in the air, and so the whole piece drips with a sense of unease. This non-functional, wandering approach to harmony, as well as the general dreamlike aesthetic, is clearly imitating the style of French Impressionist composer Claude Debussy's solo piano works, and it does a great job evoking that type of surreal beauty in a way that's also a little disquieting. In contrast, the title screen theme that greets you after you've defeated the final boss of the game and freed the theater from Madame Grape's clutches, titled Captivating Prelude, feels much more theatrical. The bright, warm light that now bathes the theater and the crowds of theats buzzing around the entranceway emphasize how empty and lonely and cold that first title screen felt. The opening notes of this new title screen theme also invite immediate comparison to the last one, with the same structure of a low bass note springing up to a mid-range chord, and the third of the chord placed high up in the melody. This time, though, the mood is immediately very different. Instead of an augmented chord, we get a beautiful F major 7 chord to kick us off, with this delicate chromatic grace note fall into our top melody note. The music isn't so empty and sterile as the previous title theme. We get a reassuring, playful touch and a nice full sound. There's also so much more dynamic range in this theme. The original title theme was slow but steady, with no changes to the tempo or dynamics, which feels incredibly cold in comparison to the new theme here. The post-game title screen theme constantly plays with the dynamics and the tempo, with huge crescendos and decrescendos and dramatic pauses and drastic changes to tempo happening on a bar-by-bar basis to milk every note for its dramatic potential. Take note of just how flexible the time and the dynamics are in each bar in these first few phrases. This style of playing is called rubato, which translates to borrowed time, meaning the piece is in time, it's just that you're borrowing time from one bar to pad out another bar, which means slowing down and speeding up as you play to best accentuate the phrasing of the piece. This kind of thing is really only possible with a solo instrument performance, and it's a staple of solo piano playing in particular. Actually, there are quite a few techniques in this piece that are unique to the piano that are used to create a big full sound. See, piano is not a particularly powerful instrument, and it has its limitations when compared to other instruments, but there are lots of techniques that have been developed to counteract these weaknesses. The first is using the sheer range of the piano, which we see used to its fullest extent here, with phrases jumping back and forth at whim between vastly different ranges. This creates a sense of scale. Similarly, lines in either hand are frequently played in octaves, lending power to moments that are supposed to be big, like this rising scale line building up to this rolled A minor chord. That's another one actually, rolling up chords rather than just plunking them out straight. This makes the chord feel like it's taking up more space than it otherwise would, and it lends a bit of a dramatic flourish to the music. I also want to point out the mismatched rhythms between each hand. In this first phrase, we have quarter note triplets happening over eighth note triplets, offbeat eighth note bass punches under a higher triplet line, and chords coming in just half a beat after their bass note. Some of this is because of the necessity of a hand to jump from one range to another to grab this bass note and then this chord voicing, for example. But also, mismatching the rhythms between the hands creates an illusion that there are more people playing than just one, and it helps fill out space to make the arrangement feel large and lively. Looking at the first Prelude theme, we can see that it used none of these techniques. The hands are locked in perfect sync rhythmically, it's all kept within a similar range, there are no octaves, everything is just plunked out straight. By looking at these two side to side, you can see how the first theme was arranged specifically to feel more sparse and lonely. Now, if we're talking music that feels lively and full, we of course have to mention these blazing fast arpeggios. At the end of this phrase, the music slows way down and we get this delicate high melody played in octaves, resolving to this D note. This bar is then filled in by lightning fast G minor 7 arpeggios rocketing up the whole length of the piano before the music drops back down to a whisper with this rolled G half diminished chord. Just try to play that on a trombone. This piece is so dramatic. It's written the way a great storyteller tells stories, grabbing your attention, then bringing things down to a whisper, breaking up the pacing, and then gradually bringing the intensity back up, interjecting with sudden surprises that catch you off guard. The final phrase sees one last big crescendo bringing us back to the top of the loop, a 2-5-1 D minor 7 to G13 setting up a resolution to C major. But instead of C major, we get plopped onto a C dominant chord. This move feels like a reference to the first title screen theme, where that B flat dominant chord resolved to a surprise E flat 7 chord, but this time we get a much more functional resolution out of it. The right hand of the C7 part takes a C7 chord through different inversions up and back down the range of the piano, while the left hand fills in the space between the rhythm of these chords with C7 arpeggios, following the arc up and back down. This C7 is stretched out over 4 bars, building and building up anticipation until the last 4 beats slowly sink back down into a resolution. A real functional resolution this time, from C7 to our original F major that started the piece. With the flashy range, octave runs, and blistering arpeggios, but also the sentimental harmony and rubato phrasing, we get the sense that the music is playing us out. It's like it's saying, "The show's over, folks. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it." It's a gorgeous piece, and with the first title screen theme, it provides a perfect bookend to your adventure at the Sparkle Theater. Both pieces are pianistic, both are colorful and dramatic in their own way, and most importantly, both give emotional context to the game they're introducing. On the one hand, an invitation to solve a problem, a sense that all is not well, but on the other, a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. The ways in which they're similar, like the solo piano setting and vocabulary, the extended, colorful harmony, the similarities in the arrangement, these only highlight the ways in which the pieces are different. The use of sparseness versus fullness, dreamlike versus theatrical, wandering versus conclusive. They're short, but these are two of the most beautiful pieces I've heard from a video game, and they single-handedly push the role of the title screen further than most games would ever care to. Thank you all so much for watching. Check out my Patreon if you want these transcriptions, and I'll see you all in the next one.